back. Tonight, the state of COVID-19, the state of BBI and other states, but just what is the state of your nation? Plus, the contentious issue of consensus, the amazing, astounding standoff about the amendments proposed on the amendments of BBI. Also tonight, a vaccine on the horizon, or is it? Where is Kenya on the long queue? A reality check. On the kicker, Kaikai's caution on Kenya's Schadenfreude about the US election. Yvonne's take is on 1,000 ways to achieve city status, Nakuru style. And just who is in charge of BBI asks the punchline. On the angle, you are on your own with COVID-19. The memo is that Jamila is on a break tonight. Let's start the show.
Major changes are needed to our constitution and other laws so as to lay the foundation for the prosperous future that we seek. As a people, we must seize this constitutional moment, as I have said. Like Moses in the Bible, who sat at the top of Mount Nebo and saw the future that the people of Israel were about to cross into the promised land, I too have seen our future.
All right, the president has seen our future. Linus, generally your take on the state of the nation?
The State of the Nation speech, quite frankly, did not impress in terms of the energy that was displayed today. I want to give a very simple example. It did not match the performance of the president at the Bomas of Kenya during the launch of the BBI report, Joe. State of the Nation, we borrowed this thing from the American tradition where every January of the year, a president appraises the country on literally the State of the Union. It is a primetime show. It starts at around 8 p.m. American time, which is at night when television numbers are really up there. And it is because the State of the Union is so important. The same importance is what we attach to the State of the Nation. And when you look, Joe, at the speech today, the president's speech only began generating interest of the audience. We heard the first reactions when the president reached a point and said, in conclusion, and started talking about handshake and BBI. That's when we started hearing the cheers. This tells you there's something structurally wrong with the speech today. It did not generate the energy it ought to have right from the beginning. Yet this is not to say it didn't contain the very serious issues that a country ought to be appraised on. But I think, Joe, there were a number of issues in terms of both the structure and even the delivery. Summary, very low energy today.
Wow, very low energy. I want us to go to Francis, who is joining us from a remote location. I think it should be in Banana, but remote only because it is far. Now, Francis, the President's State of the Nation speech today, your overall take?
The State of the Nation is not exactly where it should be. I mean, we could be better. We could be at a better place as a country. We are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and at the same time, we're dealing with people who are disillusioned, people who are anxious, people who are a little disappointed, and people who probably would want something better for themselves and for their country. When you talk about a discussion about amending the constitution, and at the same time that discussion that was meant to build bridges seems to be building something else. At the same time, when the country is dealing with a serious pandemic, gives you a situation that is not very, very good. Overall, my reading of the president's speech, I think there was too much expectation on what the president would say. And largely, I expected that he would tell us, now that the BBI report is out here, now that it was unveiled at Bomas of Kenya, now that he told us to go and read the document, I would have expected that he would tell us, now that you have read it, this is what is next. I think that is what was missing, in my opinion. And speaking to a few MPs, the opinion that probably he would have given a better roadmap in terms of the implementation, and maybe even give us a clear idea on what is going to happen, who is going to implement it. Because as it stands now, the BBI task force mandate lapsed in June this year. So will it be a new mandate for the team? Will there be a new team to carry over from where the Yusuf Haji team left? So for me, a State of the Nation address today did not address quite a number of issues that I would have expected the president to address.
Oh, thank you, Francis, and I'll be getting back to you in a short while, because that BBI conversation actually was a good chunk of the speech, and as Lina says, it was actually towards the end when the president had started saying finally. But Yvonne, I don't know what you made of the state of the nation speech that the president gave. Lina says low energy. Francis says it didn't quite address everything. I don't know what you saw where you were.
It was seemingly becoming what we've seen over the years. I mean, I know it's supposed to be, some sort of scorecard of where we have been, but it's, positive and rosy. It's hard to see where we're saying that, there were some issues that we wanted to address that we didn't get the opportunity to do so. It's all rosy, but this is what, for me, I found was missing, particularly at a time when the whole world and the country particularly is looking towards, the COVID-19 vaccine and the possibility of that with Pfizer. We didn't hear the president, the man who's at the helm of the executive, talking about, what Kenya's plans are with regard to access to the COVID vaccine, addressing perhaps any stricter measures that we would take in the country, considering we've got, this November could actually be the country with the month with the highest number of deaths so far at this point. Some long-term and mid-term plans to address that. But what is also interesting for me, I think, I found various similarities between what he said this year and what he said last year. In fact, quite a few repetitions. Talking about access to the credit guarantee scheme that he talked about last year that was supposed to be available and accessible by October this year. Again, it was said the same thing. And it's all about recapping what has been happening over the last couple of years, particularly since 2013 when he took over, with no seeming deadline in sight. And I think that's something interesting. It's supposed to be a scorecard of the last year, but we're not seeing very much of deadlines of what happened over the last year. Many repetitions that we're hearing. Here's another interesting one, Joe, before I hand it back to you. I found it curious that once again, the president referred to the World Bank Ease of Doing Business ranking, saying that Kenya has improved in total 80 slots since 2014. I don't know if the president and his team are aware that in August of this year, this report has actually been suspended, and there's been quite a few controversies around it, citing a number of irregularities with regards to the data appearing to have been altered, and the controversy surrounding the methodology in this, and I found it interesting that he sort of made reference to that when it is no longer in use. It was a little interesting.
He actually said that we had improved by a lot.
By a lot.
Okay, let's try and bring Francis in a little bit here. We are starting this going deeper into the president's speech today, and he talked a little bit about BBI, but as you were pointing out there, he didn't quite seem to provide the answers that many people are waiting for, in the sense that he mentioned consensus, because that has been a contentious issue, but not quite in the way that provides more light than heat. I don't know, what did you make of the president's reference to what ought to happen now with the BBI document?
The talk about consensus, Joe, is something probably I would have expected the president to expound a little bit more, because that word has been very contentious. I would have expected that consensus is about agreeing, is about bridging the divide. But that word consensus is turning out to be something different, because I think there are various interpretations of what consensus is insofar as our politicians and our leaders are concerned. Because on one hand, I hear one group say this document will be dealt with as is. Not a comma, not a full stop will be removed. Maybe just a few editorial aspects on it. But on the other hand, I hear another team say, no. The second document after the first one of 2018, the 2019 one offered an opportunity for Kenyans to say a few things that they would have wanted to see in the document. And so the first document of 2019 and now the second document of 2020, I hear more people say that it is also offering them an opportunity to make recommendations. And it's quite a discussion insofar as how much is available for consensus. Is that we are moving from document 1 to document 2 and now maybe to document number 3. And once we are done with document number 3, will it also offer an opportunity for document number 4, number 5, ad infinitum? So probably the president would have given us a clearer indicator of what this consensus means. Because at the Bomas of Kenya, the president, the ODM leader, and the former Vice President Kalonzo, former Vice President Musalia, and even Deputy President William Ruto, everybody was telling Kenyans, go read the document, understand the document. So now the question is, once you have read the document, once you have understood the document, once probably you have ideas on how to improve the document, either by adding a few or removing some of the proposals. So what do we do with that understanding? What do we do with the proposals that we have after reading the document as a country, in terms of additions, in terms of subtractions, maybe merging a few ideas and so on and so forth. So probably there is need to clarify to Kenyans what this consensus is and how much of this consensus is available, because ultimately this is a document that probably needs to be taken to Kenyans to make a decision at the referendum. So will it be to a certain limit that this is the farthest we can go in terms of consensus, and thereafter Kenyans will make a consensus with the document, either by accepting it through their vote or rejecting it through the very same vote, particularly on matters that require a referendum, and leave the rest to members of parliament, because some of the issues that I've seen in that document require changes that will be done in parliament through amendments to various acts of parliament. So maybe that dichotomy of what needs to be taken to parliament, we get a clearer picture. What needs to be taken to a referendum, we get a clearer picture. How much of a consensus is available, and then ultimately a decision be made in parliament and at the ballot by the citizens.
All right, thank you, and I think Francis raises interesting things, Linus, and that actually speaks to what we are seeing right now. What is who is in charge of this thing? What is the next step? Like, if I have an idea now, because people are saying, oh yeah, this document needs to be opened, we need to get ideas into it, but it just seems to me that there is so much confusion about where do these ideas go? Who's going to decide which idea is worth considering? And what is the end product of those ideas? Is it going to be another document or whatever? I see a lot of confusion here about what happens. It's almost like that task force finished its job and went away, left us with this document, and now we're arguing about whether we can open it or not. What do you see as the next steps, and about the quality of guidance that is coming, either from the president today or generally in the process as we have seen it in the last couple of days?
I think it's a very pertinent question, Joe, because what the speech by the president today does is to deepen the confusion you are talking about. Deepen because it doesn't give any more hints or guidance on the question of the roadmap of what next, like you correctly point out. Now, the difference between this process, the BBI process, and other previous constitutional review processes that we've had, be it the 2005 one, be it the 2010 one that led to the constitution that we have now, is there was a clear pipeline in those previous initiatives where, for example, we had a committee of experts that was busy working on the views that were received. We had the national convention when it comes to the 2005 one. We had the CKRC, which was a complete commission led by Yashpal Gai to act as the link point for all the views regarding the new constitution. Now, and as Francis pointed out earlier, the term of the of the task force ended in June. And so the BBI report flies around a number of desks. We've heard of people talking of the parliamentary initiative, the bits that can be done through parliamentary bills, but it's not clear who is the leader there. Has this been handed over to Parliament formally? That is not the case as far as we know. What about the issue of the referendum? The last we heard of that was former Prime Minister Raila Odinga talking about the popular initiative going to the counties and getting the 24 counties passing the bill in in a week's time, within a week. So there's a lot of confusion, there's lack of leadership, there's lack of a focal point where the BBI report ought to move to next. And that is a question that can only be answered by President Uhuru Kenyatta and his handshake counterpart Raila Odinga, because if the mandate of the task force is over, then who is supposed to carry the paperwork around Joe? We do not know.
And Yvonne, this speaks to, I think, a problem that a lot of people were pointing out initially, that this thing was kind of coming from a different direction, as Linus was saying, that it is not the normal manner in which these things usually happen. Yep. So much so that right now, this BBI report is looking for legs with which to walk into the usual sort of legal process. Because if you're going to amend the constitution through the parliamentary initiative, then it means that somehow this report in some form or other then has to find its way to Parliament. Then if you're going to do it through the popular initiative, at least the parts that will require a referendum, then you're also going to have to go through the route of collecting signatures and that sort of thing. It just appears that finally the chickens are coming home to roost, that this was not something that was perhaps out of a groundswell of a popular sort of demand for a constitution that then leads to certain things happening, like we saw with the Bomas conference, and then later on when it was picked up, the committee of experts actually came now and was looking at all these documents and trying to harmonize them. But here we are. I mean, we are talking about a document that is trying to find legs with which to walk into the legal channels.
Absolutely, and that's because I think that was very clear from the start when where the constitutional moment was discerned was at the top. The president has said, I think twice or three times now, that he's discerning a constitutional moment rather than it coming from the bottom. And that is why many would have thought that, and I think when we were even discussing it in the newsroom, we said, okay, so perhaps in this speech he'll give a very concrete way forward regarding what's happening with the BBI and the next steps and being clear about it. But what is clear, I think, is this. Regarding the parliamentary route, that might not be a wise one, considering quite a bit of, rebellion, if you like, within Parliament. And that could be very dangerous. It could be something that, could be dead on arrival. And so you go the parliamentary route. And we're starting to hear that the signature collection will begin on Monday, is it? And yet today is Thursday. You'd have hoped the president would have addressed that, in the State of the Nation today, that, starting next week, this is what we're going to do, and this is how long we intend to take with the process, and that sort of thing. So it seems to me like that roadmap is known by a very select few of leaders in the country, and that regardless of everything that is being said about consensus and all of these issues that are being brought up by the Catholic Church, the evangelicals, I believe we've heard from the County Assembly's forum today as well, the pastoralist communities.
The governors.
The governors as well, coming up with some rather interesting demands there, regarding retirement pensions and that sort of thing. It's, let all of that happen. But I think even in as much as he didn't make the roadmap clear, I think the roadmap is very clear. They have said they will only allow editorial changes, nothing substantive. We hear next week there are going to be signatures. So I think, it was in what he didn't say that makes it even clearer, the route that this will go. And that is, that they're going on with business as usual, regardless of, all of these that we're hearing on the sidelines.
And I don't know, Joe, whether I'm reading too much into the arrangement of the speech, but from looking at how the BBI issue was placed right towards the end of the speech, the only thing I can infer there is the drafters of this speech struggled a bit on what exactly should be the pitch of the entire speech. You see, it didn't have a lead. It went into, first of all, into all these other things, including a very random walk-in into what I would have considered a very big issue that it should have addressed, which is youth and innovation. Maybe if Robert, we could hear this soundbite, the president talking about youth and innovation.
Shifting our youth to become owners of capital also requires us to develop productive capabilities that move from the rudimentary to the complex operations. This is partly why we have revived Rivertex as a producer of textiles and a consumer of locally produced cotton. This is in line with the agricultural transformation strategy.
Yvonne, did you see that from
I did.
youth?
Owners of capital, and from rudimentary to the complex. I mean, it couldn't be more clearer
And
than
very
that.
quickly to agriculture.
Yes.
But he also said something interesting about the youth, which I thought was kind of dovetailing into the politics that we have seen in the last couple of weeks, where he was saying that what is needed is sort of to empower the young people and turn them into owners of capital instead of I don't know, inciting them or something to revolt against their country and the elders, something of that sort, which was quite interesting, considering the conversation that has been going on in the country about hustlers and all the politics around young people and how to include them and get them involved in the politics.
State of the Nation speeches, Joe, ought to be very specific. They're not speculative. They are a report form.
Yeah.
You're actually reporting on exactitudes. This is what happened. This is where we are going. And in terms of the youth, I think there was a wasted opportunity. There was a very slight reference to what happened in Manyani recently, and we actually got to witness very, very interesting, innovative ideas going on there with about 560, involving about 560 youth. If you looked at the length of that, it was not, to the best of my recollection, more than a paragraph in terms of reference. So back to the point that I was trying to make on the issue of pitching the speech, you could tell that the writers of this speech were not sure what the lead should be. The lead, and in terms of how media is going to consume it and how the bulk of the public will consume it, is going to come from the end of the speech, which is BBI, handshake, which in itself points at something that should be a structural anomaly of the speech.
Yeah, but could we speculate that perhaps he knew he would get a thrashing if he went very heavy on BBI at a time when, the country is, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, wondering what's next with the education calendar, and therefore just sort of puts it, as a footnote almost, towards the end of the speech, just so that he looks like he's very aware of what's happening, to the extent that Kenyans would have said, well, why would the focus be on COVID-19, on BBI, when there's COVID, there's an academic calendar that we're unsure about, and there's all of this innovation with the youth and the country being greater than an individual and things like that. It would seem to me like that might be what he was angling for, and to just say, we're with the BBI and this will go on. Because trust me, had he have made that the focus of it and a big part of it, the backlash would have been, swift from the members of the public.
It still does come out as the main takeout today. That was the only moment that Parliament cheered. That was the only moment they sounded like they were listening.
But I think it was rather obvious why.
Yeah, but
then whipped in line,
but
I think.
I think I agree with Linus that there's a sense in which the speech didn't have a linchpin. Like, what is this thing? What was the theme of it even? Because there is usually you'd see the theme of a speech. There would be like this central theme around which the entire speech kind of revolves. This one, I think, was kind of all over the place, and even on issues that he needed to have been specific. Because I think that there is nothing he said today about BBI that he hasn't said, that other people have not said. And I think on a critical stage, like where he was today, one would have expected him to clear the confusion that is going on in the country right now.
Address some of those sentiments on consensus and things like that.
Because we don't know what consensus mean. We don't know whether the Raila Odinga, for example, said the other day that they'll only do editorial work and whatever. There hasn't been any sort of indication about whether that is indeed the official position of we don't know who, because it's not clear who's running BBI right now. But it is not clear whether that is actually how this is going to go, that there is no new idea that will be put in there. If there is indeed any new idea, where is it going to come from? Who's going to take it? How are they going to decide that? And I want to bring in Francis here a little bit as we seek to expand this BBI issue beyond what was going on today. Francis, going into this speech today, we have seen a lot of interesting developments with BBI. We've seen demands coming from various quarters and so on. And it does seem to me, you alluded to it earlier, that this actually can easily become an endless, rudderless, headless process that goes on ad infinitum, as you said.
Absolutely. I look at it more like a wish list. Everybody is now using this opportunity to say, this is what we would like to see in the document. And make no mistake, Joe, there are some genuine concerns. There are some genuine issues. There are some genuine recommendations that are being made. But at the same time, we can also not run away from the fact that there could also be some issues, that some recommendations that may look untenable and probably meant to be so that you derail the entire process. Because truth be told, the BBI process and the handshake is not everyone's cup of tea. It has had its fair share of opposition, especially from the deputy president's side. And so some of the recommendations may be genuine, some of the recommendations may not be genuine, and may have other political reasons behind them. But ultimately, the decision on what recommendations will be carried through and what recommendations will not be carried through is another very contentious discussion that we will be facing very soon. Because if, for example, let's say the president and the former prime minister establish a technical committee to spearhead this process of BBI, that recommendation, that task force, if it is that technical committee, if it is set up, will probably be tasked with the responsibility of analyzing the recommendations that will be coming from various people. We have seen the Catholic Church today, the bishop saying a few interesting things, the evangelicals, we've seen the governors, even members of the county assembly. You will even see doctors and nurses and teachers and police and everybody else making recommendations on how they would want the document to look like. So once the recommendations have been made, to who will the recommendations be taken? And if there is a technical committee, for example, that will be established to take care of the recommendations, what criteria will that technical committee use to say your recommendations are okay, so they will be incorporated in the document, and your recommendations are not okay, so we will knock them off? So that's a discussion that may also be as contentious as the current discussion that we have. And I've also seen an interesting thing, that various people who have various issues to do with the document have been attempting to seek audience with the president and the former prime minister to deliver to them their concerns, their recommendations, their proposals, their arguments. We saw the former prime minister meet pastoralists. We saw members of parliament meeting in Naivasha with the president and the former prime minister. We saw the governors meeting in Naivasha, and everybody else who has had something to say about the document. So does it mean that once they meet the president and the former prime minister, that their concerns are carried through? And when we are told that it will be editorial changes, how much of these editorial changes will they be, and how do they affect ultimately the content in the document? So when you hear one team say some of the proposals are not important, that you should include other proposals, does it mean remove this, add this, or does it mean retain what is currently there, add more? So probably there is need for some thorough discussion about this and a clearer picture on how the country will be moving. Because I look at this and side by side with the roadmap that we saw being unveiled in Naivasha the other day, It means that if that roadmap is in place, collection of signatures and everything else, and even a tentative date for a referendum in June next year, I wonder how much of the recommendations that are coming from various places will be accommodated into the document that seems already to have a timetable in terms of implementation.
All right, Francis, I think we will take a short break because we'll be coming back with a bit of that. I mean, just who, even if it were to be editorial changes, who exactly is going to make the changes? It's quite an interesting discussion. News Gang will be right back after this break.